Good evening. I've decided to do a little bit of a Ranter review on a particular topic. The show The Acolyte, that had just recently had its final episode of its season 1 a few days ago. And I had a lot of things to talk about with that. Just sort of like want to vent it out there. First things first, though, is that I'm only going to discuss things in front stage, meaning the stuff that's actually on the show that you actually see. None of the backstage stuff. I'm not going to talk about the showrunner. I'm not going to talk about the writers or the actors or if like the show itself is woke or not woke or any of this nonsense that is also seems to be prevalent in any of these conversations concerning the Acolyte or anything of the Star Wars material that is from Disney. It is one of those things where when you're trying to give out an opinion on a media like this show, and people was already jumping onto it, saying that it was too woke because of certain matters of like either the show's story or the people running the show or the basic tone of the show or where they were going with it. And I frankly am not going to get into this woke anti-woke bullshit debate. No, I don't want to talk about any of that. I just want to talk about the show itself. And as somebody who is a more than average casual Star Wars fan that likes, obviously I liked all the movies of the from prequels to regular to sequel trilogy. I liked them all. I mean, some of them had issues that I had, but all in all, I will watch them all and find entertainment out of it. I like some of the side stories. I love Rogue One. I like some of the shows, even some that is also considered not all that popular, or people that just rag on it because of it being too woke one way or the other. I liked Kenobi. I liked Ahsoka. I like the animated series, The Clone Wars. I actually thought that actually was pretty good from my point of view, where it felt like Star Wars. Even though it was a 30-minute animated show, you still felt like you were in the middle of the Clone Wars. Like in these little episodes, or like these little missions that are going on in this ongoing conflict, where you know it's going to end at the end of the prequels. But that said, I want to talk about my opinion on The Acolyte. And I don't like The Acolyte. I don't. I am trying to grasp who is the audience for The Acolyte. Because for the people that I've saw the reviews of who were avid Star Wars fans, they're pulling their hair out about how this show developed and came about. And those who were really hardcore in terms of knowing the knowledge of like the expanded universe or legacy, or the time gap of where this show had landed, or where they had to decide to do this, which was, from what I understand, this is 80 years before Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So it was called this period of time called the High Republic. There's some issues concerning this time frame that we would also get into with this. But I find the show to be a mess. I find the show to be frustrating, not only as a Star Wars fan, but I can imagine as a casual fan, as you're trying to follow the breadcrumbs of this story, where we're just having flashbacks and almost flash sideways of those flashbacks, because we're seeing like the events of a flashback from a different angle, so sideways. And it's storytelling. It's a mess. It is frustrating because there are obvious answers to certain questions that are done in the show, but if they answer those questions, there wouldn't be a show. So we have to pretend that we're dumb. But I'm going to go through a few of these things that had frustrated me about the show. The time frame is interesting. How it is far away from the movies that people know of Star Wars. So this is a relatively new period for them to go through. However, they still feel the need to put in the member berries of the character Ki-Adi-Mundi, who was in the prequels and suddenly shows up here. His race is long lived enough that it made some sense that he was there, even though there is an age discrepancy therein. They cameoed Yoda at the very end of the last episode, and just see the ears come on. And a certain other character that I'll get into, which is also one of the problems that I have with the show. As I said in the foreground of what I wanted to discuss here, in terms of not wanting to talk about the backstage stuff, there are certain people that who do complain on the anti-woke point of certain events in the show concerning this witch coven. I don't care about that. And this is one of the things where I have to emphasize again how I don't care. I don't care what actors you put in. I don't care of the gender identity, the male, female, trans, straight, gay, whatever. I care about if I'm seeing a good story. This is not a good story. That is my problem. It's not the problem of the casting or who's the wife of who, or well, all these women are just women and they're coming to witches. Does that mean that they're I don't care. I don't care what they are. It's just that this is a bad story. That's pretty much it. And I'm not gonna go through the laundry list. I'm not doing a full-on review of every little minute of this show. I'm just relaying out to my precious void what frustrates me about this show. So I will get some. I'll talk about certain characters, and then we'll talk about other characters because some of them are just wallpaper in the background. You'll just notice them, and it's just wonderful. One of the other things that bothers me is not only how the story was so messed up and frustrating, but how they wasted talent. They had Carrie-Anne Moss on this show. You had Jedi Trinity on this show. And the first episode, they kill her off. First 5 minutes. And then we get the credits. Then we get the title card. The Acolyte. After they killed Jedi Trinity. In my humble opinion, they could have had a whole show just from her. That was a disservice to waste someone like Carrie-Anne Moss. You see her twice in the show after this in flashbacks. The flashback and the flash sideways. The premise of how the Acolyte is being called the Acolyte is that there is a dark sider that is influencing one of this pair of twins that was born to these witch coven from a virgins in the Force, which means they were conceived by the Force inside of one of the witches, and the virgins split the entity into two, and now you have these twin sisters. So it's spoilers. This is spoiling this whole thing. I don't care. I don't care. But so that's the premise of it. A Virgins in the Force, if for those who are a little bit more Star Wars savvy, was what was called upon when Qui-Gon Jinn and met Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. Yeah. He was the Chosen One in the prequels. Anakin Skywalker, yes. He was conceived through the Force, through his mother. There was no father. And he was the Chosen One that was to bring balance to the Force. That's another story entirely. But 80 years prior now, according to this continuity, whether this is going to be considered canon or not, these two girls, who was a single entity that is being thought of that was split into two, that was born to these witches, is from another virgins. That apparently is the same as the chosen one. Okay. The story arc of how this happens is how one of these twin sisters meets up with this Darksider who trains her and puts her on the task to hunt down and kill these 4 Jedi that went to the Witch Coven, and one thing led to another which had the Witch Coven be destroyed. And these 4 are the targets of the assassinations of this one pissed off sister of the 2 sisters that was going to go after him because she blamed them for the killing of not only her mothers but the other witches, and just ruining her life, and all the butterflies are gone. Whatever. Let me talk about the actual event before I go into further into this. Is that the event is one of these things that pisses me off as a viewer, because it is a series of comical mistakes called comedy of errors. People with misunderstandings and eavesdropping and only catching half of a conversation or catching half of a visual stimuli, so they're drawing their own conclusions, and then they're making mistakes, and then when they confront with these mistakes, instead of it being clarified, things get worse and then worse and then worse, and then boom, things happen, people die. Okay? The Jedi's, after one of the main protagonists named Soul followed these 2 little girls back to the Coven, and then decided to climb over the wall and start eavesdropping on them. Reported back to Carrie-Anne Mouse's character and to the other 2 Jedis. One was the Wookiee Jedi, his name escapes me, so it's the name for Carrie-Anne Mouse's character, excuse me, and the one for Torben, who was the Padawan then. And they go to introduce themselves and ask about the 2 little girls who were Force sensitive, and they probably would like to take them with them so they can properly train them in the Force. The witches aren't having that. The witches are not happy that the Jedi are there at all. And one of the main comedy of errors that happens in this point, is one of the mothers possesses the Padawan named Torben. In a rather awkwardly erotic scene too, because there's nothing overt, but just the motion and the words that she was saying to him, and it's just like, and he's a young guy, and and all he wants to do is, what is your greatest desire? And he just wants to go home, which is his motivation about how he's bored of being on this planet with the other Jedis, who are just looking for evidence of his virgins, how this whole planet that's supposed to be dead is now full of plants and animals and wonderful, and now they discovered these people here, and then he just wants to go home. And if it requires him doing a report on these 2 girls, then he's going to get a home. Then that's his motivation, right? But she possesses him in front of the other Jedis, which makes her a hostile entity. Carrie-Anne Moss's character pretty much retreats the Jedi, keeping it all peaceful, and they're going to walk away. But while they're walking away, she still says that they want to test the girls. And Osha, the one sister who did not start the fire, who did not become an assassin yet, said that she wanted to go do the test, and she and Saul had a moment where he was showing her his lightsaber. And so the one mother agreed for them to get tested, but then we later see in another scene how she wanted the 2 to lie, to make sure they made mistakes in this test so that they could be ignored and then sent back. Well, turns out that the Jedi is a little bit more smarter than that, and Osha actually wants to take the test anyway. Because she, unlike her sister, who is totally into this Force cult, which these witches are, is more interested in joining the Jedi. So another comedy of errors happens, is that when they test May, they figure out that May was lying upon what she's seeing on the screen, or what she's seeing through the force on the screen, even though the screen is not on, but she's still saying things. So they know she's lying. And then when she speaks to them, she misspeaks what she was taught or what she was told. That her and her sister were going to get sacrificed, as opposed to another phrasing. So now the Jedi have it in their head that these two little girls are going to get sacrificed by these witches. Or at least it's very much prevalent in Saul's head. So, more comedy of errors happen, and there becomes this important night for the two girls where they're officially going to join the Covenant, and then they're going to get branded on the head with their little Covenant symbol, and they're all chanting about the power one, the power two, the power many. This is the whole chanting that all these witches are doing. It's supposed to emphasizing that they're powerful, right? Okay. Well, Osha doesn't want to do it, and she backs out of it, and May's pissed off that her sister doesn't want to do it, and pissed off that Osha wants to visit the Jedi and go with the Jedi and want to join the Jedi, and May is so pissed off about it, and tempted by her other mother, who was really pissed off that the Jedi is there, tells her to get mad. And so, because that taps into the dark side, we Star Wars people understand that's what that means. However, that's not explicitly implied. She just tells her to get mad. So she gets mad, she stomps off. She locks Oshu in a room, says that she's going to kill her, and then she sets the book on fire that she has. It has, I guess, Jedi knowledge or something. And that accidental fire, the book that she intentionally burned, accidentally triggers more fires to be burnt, and she runs away, and now the fire is all over the place. Okay? Long story short, the Jedis do come there, Torben and Sol. They get threatened with attack by the witches, and the one mother, is warning them, to get back and go away. And she's there, and then May shows up, and Sol is watching the mother turn into some sort of force wraith, and sees May is also fading away. So this particular mother of the Covenant, the mother of these two girls, already possessed the Padawan, Torben. So they saw this. They saw this hostility already, and now they're seeing her transforming. So Saul stabs her and kills her with his lightsaber. It is an accident, but I understand why he did it. Which starts the chain reaction of other things that happened. The other mother tries to attack Saul with her weapon. Saul doesn't fight back. He's actually mortified that he killed the other mother, since the other mother says that Osha was going to go with him. She was going to let her go. And her counterpart, this other mother, is just screaming at him to fight her, and he's not fighting her. She's swinging, and he's just blocking and sidestepping and moving out of the way with this very distraught look on his face while he's doing it. She then disappears in a puff of smoke, similar puff of smoke that the other mother was going to before she got stabbed. Then the Wookiee Jedi appears and is possessed by the power of many, which means all these other witches that are all together in this communal, combined possession. So they possess the Wookiee to attack Torben and attack Saul. And then Indara, which is Carrie-Anne Moss's character, I got the name, she arrives as the Wookiee is kicking the shit out of Saul and Torben, clawed up Torben's face as he's holding him against the wall as he's trying to kill him. She arrives. You almost hear a little Matrix sting of the Matrix theme when Carrie-Anne Moss's character arrives, Indara, and like sort of Hurricane Rana's the Wookiee down to the ground, and then she uses her power to purge out the witches. Now, before I continue further on this train, we were told at this point these witches were powerful. and the powers combined, the power of many, is more powerful than the power of two or the power of one. We were told this. They're powerful. Ooh. Okay. She exorcises them out of the Wookiee Jedi's head. One Jedi. And that has the power inadvertently to kill them all. So 47 witches, 48 witches, because there are about 50 witches there. The 48 that were concentrating on holding and possessing this one Wookiee Jedi was excised out of his head by one Jedi, and they're all killed. Okay. So, in my humble opinion, and just opinion, that power of many thing, it's a bunch of bullshit. So, yeah. Few more comedy of error events happens. Osha was able to escape the room she was locked in and escape the fire. She gets onto a bridge, and May is on the other side of the bridge. The bridge breaks apart. Saul is there and tries to hold the bridge together with the Force, but it's not holding well. So then he shifts and grabs Osha by the Force, so that when the bridge collapses, she is saved. May goes down. May goes down this hole. And she survives, obviously, since she's 16 years later, she's hunting down and killing these Jedis. But another plot problem with this in my head of the writing is, why couldn't Soul just grab both little girls? They're 8 years old at the time. Little girls with the Force. Forget the bridge. Hold them. Pull them in. But no, if that happened, there would be no story. Alright, I'm not going to go through the whole story here. I mean, I did enough just to explain this crucial incident in these two little girls' lives and when they grow up. Osha tries to join the Jedi, but they don't allow her because she is too old for the joining. At least that's the official word of it. Saul wanted to tell the Jedi Council what really happened here, but Indara, Carrie-Anne Moss's character, said no. And the reason why she said no and why she wanted to cover it up, at least for her official point of view towards Saul, is that they would take Osha away from Saul and wouldn't let her even attempt to be trained. Because of the incident, she would just be a product of that incident. So that happens, and regardless of the fact that they did this cover up here, which these characters, these Jedis, all have PTSD about, for good reason, Osha doesn't get trained as the Jedi, with the Jedis, and she leaves. Because she later says that she couldn't handle her emotions because she was pissed at her sister for causing the fire. Which she then believed was the reason why her mothers and the other witches were killed. She caused the fire. All the other deaths is part of the comedy of errors here. But we fast forward a bit, we find out that May is getting trained by this Darksider. I'm not going to say Sith, I'm going to say Darksider, and I have reasons for that. But she's trained well enough. Now, she doesn't use a lightsaber, I think, at all. She uses knives, but she does kill Indara first 5 minutes, which is impressive. She finds Torben, convinces Torben to drink poison to kill himself for his involvement in what happened with the witches. She goes after the Wookiee Jedi, who actually gets killed by her Darksider quasi-master, who, at the time of her discovering the Wookiee's body, was essentially told him, even though she didn't know it was him. There's a guy named Kamir who was trading her the poison and was helping her in these things, but he didn't identify himself as her master because her master was always wearing a helmet every time she met him. He was like an associate of him. So yeah. So, but the Wookiee Jedi gets killed by the master, who was actually Kamir. The comedy of errors further happens is that Osha gets blamed for the killing of Indara because she looks exactly like the young lady that killed Indara, even though they believe that May was dead. They realize May is alive. The Jedi first arrest her. She escapes because, not really that she escapes from custody, but the ship was being destroyed, or the other prisoners escaped and she had to escape herself. Jedis find her. They were going to arrest her, but then Sol is there because he made it a point because he was her former master, quasi, because she wasn't really training, but he was the person that was her, pretty much her foster father at that point, from her being young up to now. Well, in the gap of time, she was a mechanic, but they rescue her from her predicament of escaping the ship. She gets kind of exonerated because they realize, oh, if May's alive and Osha wasn't nowhere near this happening, then well, I guess she's free now. I know this is a bit much. That's why this is a mess. I think me explaining it how I am, you might think it's a little. It might be a little inconsistent and a little convoluted of how I'm explaining this to you. This is how I saw it when I was watching it. Okay? So the Wookiee Jedi gets killed by the Master. All the other Jedis that come to arrest May with the help of Osha, they all attack this Master. They all get attacked by this Master, and one by one, they all get whittled down. They do some pretty cool fight scenes, so I'm not going to knock it for its fight scenes. I think that's pretty cool. They introduce Cortorsis, which is a mineral that he made into his helmet and into his gauntlets that actually shorts out lightsabers. So he's like headbutting lightsabers, and they go out and short out for like a minute or so. So that's an actually kind of cool angle, because also his lightsaber, his red lightsaber, is also cool because it separates and it becomes a little. It becomes like a dueler's weapons. That one's the sword and one's the dagger. So that was cool. His fight with Sol is also cool. Sol's the only one that stays alive. Everyone else dies at his hands. Some of them are Osha's friends. That becomes important later. Long story short, they do a little trade of the sisters. May gets captured by Sol. Osha goes with Chimera. There's some stuff I'm not going to get into about because too many people have talked about it, and that's more of the backstage stuff than the front stage stuff. But he essentially seduces her towards the dark side through his talking with her. All the while, she's not all that happy with him because he killed her friends. Sol has May. He wants to get Osha back. He wants it to go to the council to prove that May and Osha are the product of a virgins. And that seems to be more important to him than the events of 16 years ago, which May is still pissed at him about. Where he feels a responsibility. He still wants to go to Jedi Council to confess it. However, he wants to have May and Osha to prove the virgins while he's doing that. There's a little bit of a priority thing here going on, and maybe the explanations should be made swiftly. About 4 out of the 8 episodes of this season is Sol pretty much saying, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell her everything. I'm going to tell you everything. Four episodes of doing that. Not counting the back. And with the flash sideways episode of episode 7 is essentially him relaying to May a lot of the stuff that May already knows because she was actually there looking at him. See, the writing is weird. Long story short, as I keep saying that, final episode, the little comedy of errors runs into each other's. Quimera and Sol has another great fight. Some people knock it, and I can understand that for those who see it. But lightsaber fight's a lightsaber fight. A casual always likes those. May interrupts their fight. after she and Osha had their own little mirror fight, like their Patty Duke on the Patty Duke show, and her being her identical cousin. The twins are the same actress. So they're doing mirror fighting. They're doing the same moves to each other. May stops Soul from defeating or killing off Khmer. And then while Osha's eavesdropping, May gets him to say that he killed their mother, which Osha didn't know about. And then Osha comes down and finds out, is this true? And as Soul's trying to explain to him a little bit more elaborately than he really needs to, he doesn't, of course, doesn't explain how she was turning into a misty black wraith thing. Well, that's why he stabbed her. He didn't say any of that. So she force chokes him. One of the things of this ongoing trend with Khmer first teaching May is that one of the things that would make her his acolyte was that to kill a Jedi without using a weapon. Well, now it's Osha doing it. So Osha in her rage is force choking, and there's a point where Soul says it's okay, kill me, something along those lines. It's okay to kill me. Out of his grief and so forth. So she does. She kills him, and he falls dead. Her sister's in the background smirking about it, and the actual act of her killing him, he's holding on to Saul's lightsaber. And so that very act of anger and anguish and all her emotions bleeds the blue crystal red. And so when Khmer tries to comfort her, she swings the lightsaber at him, and the blue blade turns red. I know I'm missing stuff like the Miralukan Jedi named Venestra, who's turns out to probably is the original master of Khmer when he was a Padawan, but then he fled her, and she has a light whip, which is actually a pretty cool weapon, and he has scars of being whipped. So there's a little ambiguity, a little mystery. What will we find out? We'll probably never find out. So, the Jedis arrive. Saul's dead. Venestra's there. She senses Khmer. Khmer puts his helmet on so the scene can be blocked. That's another thing Cortez can do. They escape. They should get off the planet together, logically speaking. But Khmer only takes Osha and mind wipes May so that she doesn't remember anything of her and him, but remembers everything that happened 16 years ago, but not the fact that she has a sister. Then May gets taken by the Jedi. She's presented to Venestra, the Jedi Master that was the master of Khmer originally, as far as we know. We're assuming. And Venestra, who's getting stressed out by a Republic senator on the Jedi needs to have oversight, and there needs to be like a peer review of the Jedi. People need to watch them. She, who knows as much as she knows about this situation, buries the situation. Now it's Saul that killed all his fellow Jedi after an incident that happened at the Covenant on that planet with the Virgins. She doesn't mention the Virgins. She mentions that there was an incident that happened with the witches. She mentions that Saul killed his accomplices, which doesn't make sense because Indara's death was seen on video, which is how they got to Osha. That's what they thought. Osha was the one that did it, but maybe she'll cover that up too. Make that despair. It was all Saul's fault. So when she, on the planet, sees the dead body of Saul, she leans over to him and says, "I'm sorry, my friend," and she buries it. She buries him as a rogue Jedi. And Osha, after murdering her father figure, has this triumphant moment as she's standing there on this other planet with Khmer, and they're holding hands between a lightsaber, and they're looking at the sun, almost like Luke Skywalker. Aww. Alright. This show was supposed to be touted, or was assumed to be touted to be a Sith-centric show. It doesn't make sense to be a Sith-centric show. First of all, why is there a mystery about it? I know they're trying to be clever, but it's misplaced. There are many factors that makes this a bad show from my point of view. The writing, as I said, was a mess. The story that I just told you in my rambling way that I just did isn't all that better if you actually watch it. So, this is not... I am not exaggerating on that. If it was a truly Sith show, maybe they don't understand how to make a bad guy show where the protagonist is a bad guy. Maybe they have to do this convoluted thing, this emotional twisting thing in order to get these two people who are Darksiders now. Maybe Sith, maybe not Sith, and I'm still going to get into why that's not from a Star Wars fan point of view. But imagine, especially for Star Wars fans, imagining the show's going to come on. In the first episode, the first start of the episode, before you see any action, before you see any actors, you see on the screen the words, "Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall set me free." That is a Sith code. Imagine a Sith show starting with that, making no bones about it, making an honest show about the Siths, about the bad guys, and following how these bad guys are infiltrating the Republic, how they are continuing on the grand plan that started with Darth Bane and the Rule of Two, 1,000 years prior to what happened in the events of the Star Wars movies, and to follow the protagonist, who is an evil Sith, who is a bad guy. How could he possibly do that? How could he have a show that bad guys? You ever watch The Sopranos? You ever watch Dexter? Breaking Bad? It has been done. It is being done. Look at The Boys, for God's sake. People are touting and following Homelander, and not getting the fact that he's a metaphor for certain political extremes. Be that as it may. It can be done. You can have a honest-to-God, honest-to-the-audience Sith show, and see how the Sith maneuvers their way in this time frame of the Rule of Two. Now, the Old Republic, for casuals, the Old Republic is back when we had as many Sith warriors, Sith sorcerers, Sith Darksiders than there are Jedi. And they had their big war between the Sith Empire and the Republic. The Rule of Two ended all that nonsense when Darth Bane decided that he should start this Rule of Two. So he pretty much sabotaged and killed off all the remaining Sith that were all together in this one world during this fight with the Jedi. He killed them all off, saving him and his apprentice, explaining, and this is the shirt, actually, of the two, Darth Bane and Darth Zana. Two there shall be, no more, no less. A master and apprentice, one to possess the power and one to crave it. That is the Rule of Two. The Rule of Two is an interesting concept in of itself, is that as Darth Bane wanted, he trained Zana, his apprentice, as much as he possibly could and give her all the knowledge that he has. Then he expected her to try to kill him, to gain the mantle as the Dark Lord of the Sith. And even got pissed off at her when she wouldn't do it. Like, he thought that she was going to wait till he was old to kill him then. And she does eventually kill him. And she moved on with another apprentice, and they continued the Rule of Two concept, where the apprentice, after learning as much as she could from Darth Zana, that apprentice killed her. And so on, and so on, and so forth. The reason why I'm bringing all this up, especially for those casuals who don't give a shit about this Star Wars lore, is one of the reasons why this show pisses me off as a Star Wars fan, and why this is a badly written show for its time frame. At the time of this show, according to Legend Continuity and Expanded Universe, which Disney and the current Star Wars people are not saying is canon, so they can try to get away with it. However, they do like some of the stuff of the Expanded Universe, so they're cherry picking what they want and calling it legacy and myth and so forth that they want to use. Well, during the time of this particular time frame, which is 80 years before the events of Star Wars Episode 1, there was a master and apprentice already of the Sith. And at the timing of this, there was Darth Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis. Now, at this time frame, from what Star Wars hardcore fans tell me, Darth Plagueis should be only 15 years old. So people had a problem when they saw a cameo of him and he's looking all creepy and old, like he's a peeping Tom as he's watching these two on the island. One of the things I will give them a pushback that and give the show just a little bit of monicum of credit is in the Expanded Universe lore, Darth Tenebrous actually manufactured his apprentice, Darth Plagueis. What had happened is that he found Plagueis' race is called the Moon. So he found two moons, male female, that were force sensitive, and conveniently got them to get together and mate and produce a child. That child, with combined force capabilities of the parents, once that child was made force sensitive, Darth Tenebrous appeared and snatched him and essentially adopted him and then raised him to be Sith. So in the grand scheme of things, Darth Plagueis, who could have been force sensitive up to the point of his 15th year of life, could have been snatched by Tenebrous, and he would be in the process of being, he would be alive in the time frame, and he would be in the process of being Tenebrous' apprentice until he eventually kills Tenebrous. Now, if you remember Episode 3 of Star Wars, Darth Plagueis the Wise, that's him. And in the line of the Rule of Two, it goes Plagueis, then Sidious. Sidious, with his many apprentices and adepts, and not really apprentices, because he kind of found loopholes in the Rule of Two when he had so many force-sensitive Darksiders working for him, and also Darth Vader, which was his apprentice. So what pisses us off as Star Wars fans, how you have Khmer and Osha and they're Darksiders, and people are claiming that they are Sith. What about Plagueis? What about Tenebrous? Tenebrous wasn't human. He was a Biff. You know what a Biff was? For you casuals who, again, don't give a shit about this lore, the Biff, the race known as the Biff, you saw them in Star Wars Episode 4, in The New Hope. You saw them in the cantina. They were the band. Yeah, they were those big-headed things where just the big eyes and things on their... Anyway, Tenebrous was a Biff. Plagueis is a Moon. None of them are human, so none of them can be... So Khmer can't be any one of them. Now, in terms of the Rule of Two, if you're serious about the continuity of this, the Rule of Two Sith line do not like rivals. do not like people playing with the dark side while they're trying to hide and formulate and continue on the grand plan that they've been doing for 1,000 years since Darth Bane. The grand plan that only will come to fruition when Chancellor Palpatine executes Order 66, ends the Clone War, ends the Republic. And then he and Darth Vader go on their killing spree of killing the Jedis up until the point where Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. So it doesn't make sense why there's a Khmer and there's an Osha. Now, a lot of the material of this show is actually in a form of continuity of the stories of the High Republic. There are characters in it, involved in it, that is in the show. So I can understand the uses of that. My issue with it, obviously, is that it is flying in the face of the continuity that Star Wars fans knew in terms of Darth Plagueis and Darth Tenebrous. I can see that there are like window options of what can be done from the cameo of Plagueis. A Vergence in the Force is essentially something that Plagueis would be interested in of itself, and it's been the opinion that Anakin Skywalker, whose immaculate conception and birth came from a Vergence, that could have been, and it's been written into the comic books and the stories, which doesn't necessarily mean it's canon. It was written in that Plagueis was instrumental in the conception of Anakin into Shmi Skywalker through the Force. So you can reverse engineer this story now that the Vergence that created these two sisters, Darth Plagueis now is aware of, and now he wants to decide to do this. I don't know about that, because the story is pretty messed, and the quality of the storytelling is pretty bad, and the dialogue is pretty bad. All of these forced delays of explaining anything, you just actually explain what's going on, there would be not as much conflict, but we have to have conflict because of story, so that's annoying. Since Khmer and Osha do not appear in the lineage of the Sith Lords of the Rule of Two, or at least especially in this time period, they're going to die. They're going to die horribly. I can imagine the scenario if Plagueis knew exactly what Osha and May were, that he would want to experiment and dissect them, because that's what Plagueis does. He is more of a scientist than he is a force wielder in the dark side. And he wants to understand things and move things around because he wants his own immortality. Which Sidious takes care of that, but we know that. The only thing I would say on the terms of that if they could have made it, that would make it make more sense for the Khmer and Osha story and the lineage of the Sith Lords, is that the canon, or at least the expanded universe canon, did have a line of the Sith Lords, starting with Darth Bane, Darzana, Darth Cadmus, and Millennial, etc., on up. However, there were gaps in the time frame within 1,000 years, and there are some Sith Lords' names that have been omitted, that there aren't any, or at least they're not known. At some certain point, then the names disappear, then they only reappear just before Darth Tenebrous. So that's a big gap of time within 1,000 years, which means you could plant Khmer and Osha way back into the timeline that has nothing to do with Skywalkers, nothing to do with Yoda, who also makes a cameo, great, and so forth, so that it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem for Star Wars fans, and they probably would get behind it a little more when that would make more sense. But no, they plunged it right there and made it complicated. I don't mind the idea of the High Republic era of Jedi being a little bit corrupt and withholding things and covering things up. Reason being is that for obviously 40 plus years of people watching Star Wars, the the idea of the Jedi being these good and noble people makes sense because they're on their last legs versus an empire. An empire who had Sith Lords who were slaughtering all the Jedi. So it makes it really easy to be the good and noble side when there's such evil on this other side. However, as far as the Jedi knew, since what happened with Darth Bane that eliminated all the Sith, there are no more Sith. For 1,000 years, they were extinct, as far as they knew. So what does this uber good organization that has no counterpart of evil to face? What happens to them? They stagnate. They wield influence in the Republic through their power, through their religious dogma, but they're paranoid of their position. They are easy for corruption because they don't have the obstacle of what happens to you if you turn dark side. Of anybody joining the Sith. Just Darksiders are just, fallen Padawans or fallen Jedi, and they get handled under the table because they don't want the Republic knowing that members of the Jedi can turn bad. Now that's understandable. That's an understandable and that's a good story arc. However, this is more along the lines of character assassination of the Jedi, as the arc of this story makes Osha killing her father figure and soul to be a triumphant moment. That she's the good guy, that Quimir is the good guy, as they stand there holding hands with a lightsaber watching the sunrise. Well, she's holding hands with the guy that killed her friends, that manipulated her sister to kill Jedi. Now, May had her mind wiped, but now she's with Venestra, who was Quimir's Jedi Master. And she wants to use her to hunt down Osha and Quimir, even though she has no memory. So, which is probably why she goes to Yoda, explaining to Yoda what happened. And the other thing that pisses Star Wars fans off is because one of the things is the character of Yoda is an uber good character. And if he was complicit with the cover-up, or if he knew about the cover-up, and he didn't tell anybody, that makes him complicit. That makes him no better and no less corrupt than any of the others. And that is not tolerable. Remember in the prequels when the Jedi even then had machinations, because when Mace Windu was about to confront Palpatine after in the incidents of Revenge of the Sith, and he and the other masters were going to arrest him or kill him, Yoda just like, great care must be done. He was very cautious upon doing such a drastic act. He didn't know anything about the clone army during the prequel, during the Clone Wars. He's going to see it for himself, and so forth. So it would be very bad for Star Wars fans for them to have this good and noble character that they've seen for over 40 plus years through the movies and through various other medias, and then he becomes somebody who will go along with a cover-up. That's not good. I nearly ranted for an hour over this bullshit. Now, they are hoping and praying and begging for there to be a season 2, if there was going to be a season 2. I don't know if I want a season 2 of this. It wasn't good storytelling, it wasn't good writing, it wasn't good pacing, and one of the other major problems with this type of story arc, which could have been improved, it could have worked out better if it was not 8 episodes and it was not 30 minutes maximum a pop. These are the type of shows that should be at least an hour long. In a season that should be at least 12 episodes or 15. I grew up through the 80s and the 90s especially with Star Trek. Like in Star Trek Next Generation, where there were like 20 plus episodes in each season. So these little eight episode seasons that are only bite sized at 30 minutes, that doesn't tell me anything. I relayed to you pretty much the bulk of this story, and as bad as I probably explained it to you, that's how it looked on the TV. So I don't know. I'm going to repeat myself, because I'm not going to go into the backstage stuff. I'm not going to talk about the showrunners or any of that other stuff. All that, unfortunately, political nonsense. But this is just a badly written, badly executed show. I want to see a Sith-centric show. I want to see a show where it's honest to the audience that the protagonist is a Sith. He is not a good guy. He is a bad guy. And you are watching the acts of this bad guy, or the bad guy and his apprentice, as they weave and hide and do their machinations and their evil plots and plans and their schemes, fooling the Jedi, fooling the Republic, having like ancillary characters on the Jedi Republic. Are they going to figure it out? Are they going to discover it? They won't. But having that, where you have a bad guy, you know he's a bad guy, and he's still your protagonist. He's the person you're following in his bad acts, and they're bad guys that are thought-provoking, that makes you feel for them in a certain way. Again, The Sopranos. Tony Soprano is a bad guy. Not only he is a mob boss, he is a murderer. He frequently cheats on his wife like it was no big frickin' deal. But you still felt for him. You still followed his story. You followed his family. You followed it. And maybe at the last episode where Don't Stop, maybe you felt bad when it went black, even though he was a bad guy. You could have had a Star Wars show that is honest to its audience that these are bad people. We are being told that Osha and Kamir are the good guys, and the Jedi are the bad guys. Those 4 Jedi that went to that witch's coven, from Sol, Indara, Torben, and the Wookiee Jedi that I still can't remember his name, sorry guys, they all suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder in their own way. Sol, probably because you follow Sol throughout the 8 episodes, the more, so you get more of his anguish over what happened, his anguish over what happened to Osha, and what happened to May. Indara didn't really, only got 5 minutes of Indara, but she's the one that compelled Sol not to tell the Jedi Council for what would happen to Osha if he did. The Wookiee who got possessed, he went into hiding. He left. He just left and went into another jungle world, and that's where he stayed until he died. And Torben became a Jedi and decided to take a vow of silence for 10 years. And then when he finally woke up and he saw May in front of him, she offered him poison and he took it, knowing it was poison, and killed himself over the events that would happen at the Coven. The events obviously were unfortunate, but they were also accidents and misunderstandings and comedy of errors. And since there was this cover-up that Venestra, the Jedi Master, and blamed it all on Saul, it just makes no sense. It's just now we won't even get to have any revelation or reflection upon any of this. If there was going to be a season 2, I hope Saul comes back as a Force ghost and just plagues Osha. I'm sorry for what I did. Go away, go away. I may explain to you finally. I can't lightsaber you away. Maybe we would see what Plagueis does to these two. What we see Yoda does with Venestra over this cover-up. But I don't want to see a season 2. I don't want this to be acknowledged in the canon. This was a badly written, badly executed show. And we deserve better as Star Wars fans. So does the actors. The actor that plays Soul learned English to do this series, and they did his character so dirty. And again, wasted Carrie-Anne Moss. Jedi Trinity. We could have had a Jedi Trinity show. Gone. The Ranter rants, this time not about politics. And it was over an hour, so I'm done. Thank you for indulging me on my geekdom.